Right, are we ready?
I really don't like this mic. It's a bit scary.
It's
miles
away from you as well.
I know, yeah. You think you're AJ's
Got big
fist.
fists.
Yeah.
And you know what they say about big fists?
The gloves.
Andy will spend this whole time messing with his mic as well.
Yeah, that's what I do. I don't actually just move it in and out.
And he likes to pretend he's a DJ or something.
Yeah, it's mainly because I've got a coffee surgically attached to my wrist as always. Cause do you know what I mean? Just drink coffee. So it's going out of fashion.
So how many coffees a day you done?
How many coffees a day do I have? I reckon I must have
Double figure.
It's not far off double figures. I reckon it must be.
No. Well, when I say double figures, we know we go back 20% then.
Yeah.
I worked out how many Christmas tunes, how many times I've heard Mariah Carey this morning.
No, you never.
We got it to 800.
800 between in the last week.
The exaggeration.
In your lifetime?
No, in the last 2 weeks.
No way, Jose.
No,
How can you listen? How could you have heard Mariah Carey 800 times in the last 2 weeks?
Because obviously I said I've heard this 1,000 times already. And then we knocked 20% off for the exaggeration factor, so it must be 800.
I thought you'd only have only got
It's the
5%.
logic immediately.
And that's why he doesn't do pricing for Concept.
Yeah, but that's the worry he does do. He doesn't do pricing, but he's charge you finance.
Get good margins.
I laughed at your email. He went, is the stuff, don't play with it too much. That's all he said, and I'm thinking,
So
Joe's
what are we...
going to come back and go, what is that?
Yeah, Mez is going to see her ass about this, isn't she? We'll get there and go, yeah, we didn't record anything. For
the first hour.
We didn't have you to whip us into shape.
When he sends it in to proof, we should just have like a false one, which has just got 2 minutes, and just say to Mez, can you edit
that was the only content we could record. 2 minutes worth of content. Yeah. We sent it into Mez.
Mez would go, oh yeah, the teaser was good. No, that was actually it.
Let's kick the podcast off then. So we're here today to have a quick chat about why some projects shouldn't even start. So let's just start the discussion. Let's open it up. So Al, what do we mean by some projects shouldn't even start? You know, what are the reasons?
I think that the main reason is you need to do the conceptual design first. Get an understanding what the project's about. You know, because if you don't, then the risks for everything, cost, time, is the project valuable enough?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of actions before this. You know, a lot of things that should be done and considered before the project actually gets the go ahead. To be honest with you.
And I think that's the point. It's the question of like, you're not literally saying that a project shouldn't start. You're saying that actually you should go in it with the right kind of structure and planning, the right phases prior to it. You know, if you give the example of like your kitchen or something like that, if you're doing a kitchen at home, you don't just say how much the kitchen, do you? You know, you need to have a look at it properly. You need to have a look at all the background behind it. What's your flooring?
Yeah, the design
what's
of the kitchen.
What's the utilities? Everything else. If you drag it back to the basics of that, it's not that you say you're not going to install a kitchen. What you're saying is though you need to put the right planning, the right detail behind it before you move into it, because the risks at the back end can be so significant. You know, the impact can far outweigh the project, and it might not be the right time. It might not have the right detail, and it's kind of all that around it, isn't it? Really, where you're not saying not to ever start a project. This really is about doing it right, the upfront.
Yeah, allocating the time at the right phase of the project to do your feed study. You know what I mean? To make sure that you do the detail within that feed study. Get the support, get the sponsors, to support the project. Because what might be meaningful for me as a project manager, you might have a completely different view of it. You know, I know Steve would. And it's just getting that, that alignment before you start and before you actually go ahead with it.
Yeah, because it's in our world, that's all like, and I like the kitchen analogy because it's like, in our world, that's like the pre-approval stage of the project, isn't it? That's kind of like, where you to your point before as well, Al, you're going down a conceptual route, you're looking at the initial ideas, the business case has got to be right, you've got to have the scope outline as as best as possible, and you've got to have a project sponsor because obviously there's got to be someone who believes in the project, who carries a bit of weight in the decision-making process, and that there's some of the key things, I suppose, in the pre-approval stages that are often overlooked, which then leads you into this position further down the line where one or two or more of them facets aren't in good shape, and so your project's not in good shape in general.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like you say, if it's not all in place, just one of them can kill it, can't it? Yeah. You know, even the basics of look at, I know the list you say, but just looking at your budget, looking at your timeline, you know, considering all of the major factors, you know, you have to go into the detail, don't you? And I think the point behind it is just making sure you allocate that time so that you do go through the right processes and give it due diligence to make sure that the importance of the back end of the project is considered at the front.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, conceptual design, a lot of people don't think of conceptual design, do they? Do you know what they want out of the back end? You know, again, if we go into the kitchen analogy, do you know they want a kitchen? Yeah. You go to Hardens or Wren or something like that, how many options are you given? And then when you go with your missus, how many more options are thrown at you, and how many things do they want more than what you had in your mind? So it's about having that togetherness and bringing the team together, talking about the design.
Well, that's a good point, because obviously, you know, the kitchen designer will then upsell everything, and it'll be, you can have this type of cooker, this fridge, this, you know, this unit, the carousel units and everything else that's in the corner. That's exactly what you get from your sponsors, because your sponsors will be from, you know, different aspects of the business, and health and safety will want to ensure it's safe. The finance, you know, will want to make sure that there's a return on investment. So, you know, as the PM, you've got to satisfy all them needs and make sure that you do tick all the boxes to make sure, you know, Andy's happy with the health and safety, you're happy with the finance, you know, and ultimately, you know, you will get a successful delivery.
So as we go through then, what do we think of the, you know, if we're going to give a bit of advice in this podcast to people potentially watching, what are the key things that we think should be considered as part of like the pre-approval process in our experience? I mean, obviously, you know, projects are to a degree subjective in terms of like the content and what you do and don't apply, but there's some general principles that I think like us, Steve, you know, we've done a lot of projects between us. I think there's a lot of commonality in the pre-approval process that we want to see, isn't it, between us?
So I think conceptual design and understanding. What are the 4 or 5, I don't know, 5, 6, whatever it might be? Yeah. What do we think? Conceptual design and understanding, I think everyone needs to know what they're signing on to. Again, you know, if there can be so many ideas bouncing around, but if that's not detailed out, you know, if that's not understood between everyone, then, you know, that's an important phase. Again, you don't need to go into super detail with it, you know, but again, you need to understand the concept, what the outcome is, you know, what you're looking for that end product to be.
Because the thing, I mean, my experience in this as well is kind of like, if you think about some of our, I guess, clients who we've worked with, who we've got common ground with, you get put on your desk certain like ideas, and there's 9, 10, 11 options of these ideas of like a product of how it needs to look, and it's been produced by the marketing team who've got ideals and, you know, dreams of what the consumer wants and stuff like that, and then you have to kind of do the idea filtering stage. And I think in my experience, that's where there has been a lot of, not mistakes, because it's probably the wrong word in a sense, but, you know, where people haven't put the 2 and 2 together about what is possible and scale up in a manufacturing environment and all that type of stuff, and then you end up, you know, they're not judging the criteria correctly against the product, so you end up going down a route which you're trying to make something possible that is impossible for what you're asking it to do in scope terms. So
yeah, I think it's important that, you know, we touch base on the marketeers will have their data and their belief of, you know, what a product should look like and the functionality of that product, but converting that product into something that, you know, is designed for manufacture is just so difficult, and they won't know, you know. That's the thing is we don't know what the marketeer really understands and what he wants, but we know, you know, as a collective of what is designed for manufacturing, and it's not just about it looks pretty on shelf, because it's not, you know, it could be the best on the shelf presence, you know, out there for anything, but if you can't manufacture it, your costs, the projects will just escalate so quickly because, innovation, it's not there,
Yeah.
But at the same time, these guys are stretching, the limits of the machinery and the materials that are currently available.
Yeah, and that rolls into the feasibility then, I suppose, doesn't it? Because obviously, once you understand your conceptual kind of design or outcome or whatever it is you're looking at, you look at the feasibility, then can you actually do it? Exactly like you say, because it's not just can you do it, can you make that, can you pack it?
Yeah.
Can you do it in scale? Even kind of shipping, transporting, things like that. How do you box them?
Exactly.
How do you put them on a pallet? Things like that. Like you say in the manufacturing world, that's related to. But again, it's the feasibility. You can make it much easier, but again, I think in our world, they're always ones that catch people out at the back end if they don't do that properly, what we've seen.
But I mean, it's also, we're relating to products, aren't we? But, if you think about it in the context of like, I don't know, pneumatics or, utilities or whatever, electrics or whatever, people think you can design things in a certain way and it's just that there's an assumption. We'll just do that and pull an extra 10 cables in from there and one from there and one from there. And you sort of go, actually, when you start thinking about the conceptual side of things, it is completely different, isn't it? So it has to, I think, to relate it back to that and the likes of even your kitchen, there's, how many times have you been doing stuff like that at home and then, your wife or, yourself even, you think, I'm sure I can have myself floating in the air in the middle of nowhere, and you sort of go, well, it's where the whole like sky hooks and all that come from, isn't it? Because people start taking a mickey.
The classic one is Ireland. I want to sink in the island. No one's thinking about how you get the pipe there.
Oh yeah, I thought you meant the country island.
I'll just
sorry.
Everyone Ireland, it sorts that out easy.
Yeah,
but yeah, you've got the island in the middle of the room, and someone says, "Oh, we'll just take a pipe to it." Well, yeah, how? So if I start digging this floor up, it is adds to feasibility being able to do it.
That would be easy if you knew about it at the beginning. Yeah. You know what I mean? So before you actually lay your new floor, if you knew that, then you won't lay the floor, and the sequence would be, put your services in there and make sure it's right, which, we've all had experience where, the infrastructure has not been right, and you're partway through the project and realise that you haven't got enough, air capacity on the site, or you've not got enough electrical, capacity to actually start to look at, what is next. And it's not just a packing line, it's a packing line and the services and, communications, it's everything. And, that's why getting everything right on the table at the very, very beginning, you stand a significant chance then of making it a successful.
So that's like the idea of filtering, and we assume we've got past that stage now, or we're in a stage where I think we've encroached slightly into like feed, haven't we? A little bit in the discussion, which is for anyone who doesn't know what feed is, it's front end engineering design, which is a bit more like the next level of evolution in terms of the concept to actually making it more of a reality, and that's where you come to optioneering and stuff like that. I know you've been waiting for me to say that.
We have.
So it's a lovely word. Explain it.
But yeah, so optioneering as well. Obviously, you've got several scenarios and how you can do stuff, and it comes back to actually what you were saying before about if you want to put a kitchen in with an island, your option is you have a sink or no sink. And you part of having a sink might be you then need to run a pipe under the floor, which then you need to then repair your underfloor heating and all that type of stuff. But yeah, it's a series of options, isn't it? Then to kind of come out the other side with an accurate cost and an accurate time scale, and then you feed that back into, for want of a better phrase, you feed that back into the client, because then you're giving them a series of thought out options really to kind of so that they understand what possibilities they've got with the limitations that they placed on you with the project. It might be technology, but it also might be cost limitation, it might be a time limitation, and each of them can affect the outcome of the feed in terms of the success of it, can't it? So,
well, all them things will formulate into your business case and what the return on investment is. Getting the scope identified at the beginning, but you will always have options on the table. One option might be £1 million, the other one might be 500,000.
Yeah.
It's important then to feed that back to, the project sponsors, and then collectively you move forward with the right technical decision and the right technical solution. Which formulates part and parcel of the feed study. I think it's important to sort of reiterate contingency. Because throughout the life cycle of the project, you need to make sure you've got contingency, and that's not just contingency in cost; it's contingency in your resource, contingency in time. Because how many projects have we done that's been based on right first time? And
I mean, they're all like kind of like sort of intrinsically linked, aren't they? You know what I mean? When you talk about these 4 or 5 things, because we're talking about these 4 or 5 interlinked necessities for this phase of the project, aren't we? Where you talk about scope constantly and the scope boundaries that surround that, which is linked directly to your feed, which is then directly linked to your business case, because obviously you need to have a fixed scope and you need to have against which to price, which then is the basis of your business case, and then that comes back into discussion with how accurate your costings are, how much contingency you're putting in, because you don't know everything at this stage of the project. No. You're kind of guessing a lot, aren't you? Calculated guesses and educated guesses, of course, because that's what you're paid for in terms of your profession. But I think from certain things I've seen in the past, some of these fundamentals are just completely lacking, aren't they? In terms of either people haven't really cemented the scope, or they really haven't cemented, the options that you can come up with, or they simply haven't done a business case and return on investment correctly, and then you end up doing a project which nobody's really done the calculations on, and then at the end of it, you stood there with a project that doesn't work, cost-wise.
Yeah.
Or time-wise, because I think there was one example actually where I think the business case was done, but it wasn't understood that how critical the time was, and then the client or the project missed the deadline for the market date for the product, and then the business case was built on the product being in market at that time, and then all of a sudden it's not a market, and your business case is kind of going completely dead in the water. And it costs, apart from the money, it costs a lot of people's careers probably at the same time, further up the chain, doesn't it? But,
and I think, the time critical elements is, market dates and release times, and that's all driven by, supermarkets and people like that, so that's where the time critical element comes in. And if you're not aware of that at the beginning, you're putting undue pressure and stress on everybody in the whole team, because from day one, achieving something in a ridiculous time frame, if you're going to miss the gate, you're better off stopping. And I would say we've all been brave enough and found the courage to turn around and say stop. We need to stop and review.
But that's the point, though, isn't it? That's what plays into the question: why it shouldn't start. So that shouldn't start. So the front end should have been done properly. The pre-approval should have been done properly. As Andy talks about, the project scope, understanding the project scope. And I suppose as you're doing it, you start to build your project brief, don't you? To come out of it, to build that business case, because that's the next phase, isn't it? That you create that brief with all the information at that point, and sit down and say, right, is this right? Is the right amount of detail? And do we understand the project enough? You mentioned it before about sponsor the project, and then you sit together and discuss them. And in your example there, in a timeline like that should be pulled out.
Yeah.
If you're doing it in the right way, that should be pulled out, and that should be the point at which you sit down and say, actually, should we proceed with this?
Yeah.
Or do you stop and do you look at other options? Because at that point, there could be every consideration that you say, well, actually, it's a non-starter now. If we don't hit the market, or, we're talking a lot about manufacturing, but at any point, any project, there would come a point where if the timelines don't fit, if the budget doesn't fit, that's the point at when you say, no, actually stop. And that's the importance of the pre-approval phase, isn't it? Because the other one as well is probably just as important is kind of, what we've called in the past, like a risk register or something like that. You're also looking at your highest risks of the project. You're not looking at all the positives of building, the timeline and your budget and everything else with, kind of rose-tinted glasses. You've also got to pull out what are the biggest risks, and you've got to be a little bit pessimistic and negative, because you've got to understand what those major risks are, because they are what's going to be the impact on it. And you've got to build that, and it all builds towards your project brief, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I think it's an interesting one. I was talking about risks this morning actually with someone else in our team, just about management of them, because we often use a RAG chart, don't we, to kind of manage the status of various parts of our projects, and the risk of not managing your risks is before it gets to an amber state where you can do something about it. It's already red and too late, and we've all seen that happen with cost, time, scope of a project where it's too late to actually affect it, to rescue it, because you've missed the risks in the first place. And I think if you don't understand the risks in the level like you were saying, Steve, before, at the pre-approval stage almost, you're in danger of missing, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's kind of is sometimes dangerous. We covered something about this in previous podcast about bad project managers, if you like, which actually is probably the last bit about the pre-approval stage, which I see a lot of mistakes being made, is probably the resources. So I think, we talk about resources in terms of money and time and all that, of course we do, but I think the actual physical people being available to support the project in the right way.
It's the right person at the right time with the right experience.
Yeah.
You can put loads of resource, but if it's not the right resource, you just adding complexity and cost to the project, which you don't need. It's just so important to have the right people, and we know from our hard experience, getting them people is so difficult, and it's becoming more and more difficult to actually.
Like you say, if the business case could stack up, but actually if you don't have the team around you, it's that simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could say, brilliant, that's excellent, we'll have this approved by the end of the week, here's the money, here's the time. You go, okay, right, where's the people?
Yeah.
It's a simple
and that in itself is a challenge, because then you start looking at seconding people and out from operations and getting contractors and companies like ourselves, and that's great. That's why we're here. That's what the business is about. But again, if it's not the right people and the right company,
but you've seen it happen so many times. How many? I mean, I could countless times where you've been pulled into a project or recruited for a project, and you've already missed 2 months.
Yeah,
because they've not had. But so for example, some of the clients, I've worked for, we've all worked for, they'll move with the project, kind of probably because of above pressure, because they might need to hit markets or anything like that. They'll move ahead with the pressure. They won't have someone directly there, but they'll keep trying to move it forward. They'll probably get someone in the team who's probably not a project manager, who doesn't have the expertise, but they keep pushing forward. And then you walk into a project. Amount of projects I've walked into and been told, oh no, we're 3 months in and nothing's been done. And you're already under pressure. You're already hit, because that in itself is just condensing the timeline, isn't it? You've said in your project brief, you've got X amount of time, but you've lost that time already. So again, the resource, as you say, is a huge one. If you've not got those people mapped out, that team mapped out around you, and saying they are available from this date, and we're talking, this is all, perfect world stuff.
Yeah, of course.
So we know we have to work around that. There's never really a perfect project, well, unless concept projects. But realistically, we know we've got to work around these. But it's, again, if we flip back to the question, why shouldn't projects start? You have to identify that huge miss, that huge point, don't you? Are we massively out on the cost? As you say, the resource, is there anyone even here? Is it going to take months to bring that person in? Don't start the project if you haven't got that. If you haven't set all your kind of dominoes up in that sense, don't start the project. That's the point.
It is. I mean, I know we've talked about 4 or 5, maybe 6 key points there, but I think it is so important. I mean, we've all had those projects which should never have started, and we sort of realised. And you know what? The comedy of it is half the time we're guilty of doing it ourselves at times in our past careers, where you think, oh, it's a small project, we'll be fine. We can deal with it. We don't need to do all them steps, because actually it would be fine. I know what I'm doing. Leave me to it. It's fine. And I remember there was a little project I'd done and when I say the name, some people will know this project from the past whose client site it was on, but it was called the Snowball Room, and a Snowball Room was a room that I was asked by one of my old bosses. not Alan.
I was just going to say it wasn't me, by the way.
To do.
He is an old boss, though.
Yeah, he is. He's a very old boss. But it was this was an old computer room that I just got told to convert into a meeting room, and it was given to me by, again, like say, by a previous boss, and just said, I'll do that. It's I think it was something like supposed to be like 50 grand or something like that. And
It's a small room.
Yeah, it was a relatively small room, but when I went in and I sort of started it without doing all of the pre-approval steps, you sort of end up in a position where you left the floor up and it was a computer room and there was hail on gas pipe all under there, which you think, oh my God, there was no discussion about this. And when we had the little discussion, we didn't do any scope brief, anything like that. It was just sort of go and do it. And then I think there was a bit of asbestos in there as well. I think there was a bit of asbestos in there.
Just to spice it up.
One of the best bits, which I'd forgotten about until this morning, was actually where the wall was. There was a room behind that no one knew there was a room there. So it was like, you sort of you sort of start dismantling stuff, and you end up going, well, there's another room there. We didn't even know. We didn't even. What do we do about that? And so you go, oh, we'll just open it up. And all of this is as you go, it's just adding time.
So why was it called Snowball?
And hence, that's why it was called Snowball Room, because everything about it snowballed. It was quite comical, actually, and it ended up over double the cost. It ended up over double the time, and it was just basically because we omitted the pre-approval stage and everything that comes with that, and just made a load of assumptions that it'd be fine. Do you know what I mean? And we go, well, there's a budget like that. We think it's that, and we think it'll be that time. Meetings and everything were planned in there for, quite important meetings were planned in there.
And it's, but in your scenario, so you've got where you've had the ability to increase the money in the timeline.
Oh yeah.
But so, the flip side to that, as you say, probably, I guess if I look back, there was one, you mentioned utilities before, but utilities I've seen, the big one I recall, again, no names, was when, we kind of ran through a project and the utilities weren't considered. There was an allowance for compressed air. So there was an allowance for pipe work, stuff like that. But actually, no one made an allowance. No one did an assessment of actually, does it have the capacity to deliver that air? And it was realised probably 2/3 of the way into the project that a new compressor for around $750,000 on site, whole new utilities, infrastructure, everything. But like I say, the flip side to that is that in an example that you give, you may have the money, you may have the time to pull that back and get that back on track, but actually sometimes you don't have that. So you're then looking at the back end of the project and you're trying to save money on that. You incur the delays.
You're forced to cut costs in different areas.
And then the impact of that is the lifespan of the project sometimes. The end product is potentially you've spent all your money up to that point, so you actually only got the back end of the, your budget, what is remaining. So actually the impact could be for the life of the project for the next 10, 20, plus years. So it just shows how important it is to get it right, to do those assessments.
Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all learned from our mistakes, haven't we? That wasn't actually my mistake. That was a project I came into. I will clarify that. I will just clarify if this is going up nationally with all our following and huge support. But again, it's another example of how, because some things you can get away with, budget and stuff like that. You can say, okay, we'll push the budget. We know we want the room doubled in size. So actually, that's a preference. So we'll accept that cost. But what you don't want is the outcome of your project, the deliverable, what you always wanted. You don't want that compromising for the rest of your life. You don't want your packing line not running right. You don't want your building not, being as effective as you wanted it to be. You don't want to cut costs on that.
No, because you're left with the outcome of that.
Yeah, well, the legacy's there forever, isn't it? Because you haven't done Because you haven't done that.
I think it's when you're faced with that predicament, if you fetch your project sponsors along with you in that journey, it's a brave man to say, yeah, okay, we're overspent, just carry on. You know what I mean? But realistically, if you actually stopped, reviewed it, and revisited the business case, you'd probably find that actually, you know what, it's the right thing to do. And the 99% of the time, I'll guarantee the project would actually continue, and it would be better. You know, so the life cycle of the project, even though it's overspent for an infrastructure issue, it's there for the next 20 years, or over the life cycle of the product.
Well, the other one is
the efficiencies and everything will all come with it.
Yeah. The other example as well is when people price a project, you know, again, one that people fall for is they price a project that's 2 years earlier. So they'll go and do a feasibility, won't they? They'll price a project up and then they'll kind of sit on the shelf for a year, something like that. Don't realise prices change, things change, you know, resources change.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes people are completely out of touch with prices generally, aren't they? You know, that's where a lot of the problems stem from, you know, in the first place, because they have this kind of 1980s idea of the way
what's wrong with the 1980s? There's nothing wrong with the 1980s. It's a good era, 1980s.
And I come back to your analogy that you used the other day. I think
again, one of my old bosses.
Yeah, put in front of anyone who's watching this, just as a bit of a question, because actually, you know, a lot of people will be stumped by the question, which is a daft one, and then, you know, so take it away, Al.
It was at the time, you know, at the time you think, why is he asking these questions? But it was something like, you know, your everyday shop. So how much is a pint of milk? How much is half a dozen eggs? How much is a loaf of bread? And I remember it as if it was yesterday, because it was, you know, the room was full and none of us got it right. You know, and it was them everyday things that you will just go to the shop or go to the supermarket and you get it. And you don't even think about exactly how much them are, you know, them goods are. So what chance have you got of, you know, if you don't know and don't understand, how can you actually put a cost to a project?
Yeah.
You know, so if you do the background, you then go to the extreme of, well, okay, how much is milk at your local store? How much is it at the supermarket? You know, and people rely on the footfall. So you only go in for milk, and while you're in there, what else you buy? You know, you buy some hair gel. Well, you should be looking at it when I say hair gel, should I? You know what I mean? But, you know, these are the things, and I remember it, you know, really, really well, where not everybody, if anybody, actually got the pricing right.
We've been through a few of the examples there. There was a bigger example. I'll just read a few facts and figures from, you know, from project everyone should be familiar with, which is our unique project friend HS2, which is quite a well-known sort of UK project, which is government sanctioned, which was some facts and figures in front of me, so it was estimated originally in 2009 to cost 37.5 billion. And then the latest cost is estimated somewhere between 45 and 54 billion, which is a humongous upturn in the cost. And that's also taken into account that phase 2, which was supposed to be completed obviously by 2033, has now been totally cancelled. So it's a total de-scope for that. And the phase 1 project of London to Birmingham was originally to be completed by 2026. It's now estimated to be completed by 2029 to 2033, somewhere between that, which, you know, is a 4-year range, which is off the charts in terms of like the delay generally. But then, you know, the cost increase plus the scope or the de-scoping, and then the time increase, it's like compounds. It just shows you everything that's wrong about the project, and that's put down to allegedly, so we don't get the government on our back.
Gotta say that word.
That's put down to over-optimistic early estimates, and the actual construction started before surveys and the designs were complete for the actual project itself. So that kind of illustrates the whole pre-approval process that we've been talking about not being done very well by the those officials who've dealt with it. I don't know who the names are. I wouldn't be naming them at this moment. But yeah, so I mean, that's just a well-known project, which just sort of accentuates the problem that we're talking about, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So a couple of bits of advice we would give to somebody who's already started a project and realises that the pre-approval phase hasn't been completed correctly. What's the advice you'd sort of give them?
Yeah, but well, there's the obvious stuff, isn't it? But I mean, you don't just wade into stopping a project every time. That's not always the answer, is it? But I mean, obviously, at some point you might
going in and probably stopping the project is a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Severe, isn't it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean, it's.
I mean, that should be the overriding thing. If the project's not right, you stop it. That's the whole discussion point of today, isn't it? That if the project shouldn't start, stop it. That is the advice. But exactly like you say, you shouldn't just wade in and say stop immediately. That's not always the answer, is it?
Yeah, and what we're saying is not stop the project and never do it. Stop the project and revisit. Even if you have to go right back to the beginning and do a fees study. Stop the bus, get off, bring the sponsors, the project sponsors together, bring the marketeers together and reevaluate the whole project and the business case, because the business case probably will work, with the changes that's done, but the timescales will be different, or the cost will be different, or the resources will be different, but don't wait till the end.
Yeah. And again, as I say, far short of stopping, communication is one of the big things immediately. Start talking to the stakeholders. Start to, again, it all comes under how big an impact potentially you're going to hit, doesn't it? Again, you might hit some small problems that were never picked up, but they're foreseeable and there's something you can work around. But again, if you can't wait till the end. And you can't bottle it all up yourself. You can't keep it to yourself. You can't keep running with the project if you know that there's a potential problem. So communication is another huge one. Get the team back together, review, assess, the likeliness. A lot of these projects, they run over long periods of time, don't they? It's probably not going to hurt to just kind of re-review, get everyone back in a room, probably prioritise, a couple of meetings to look at what the outcome potentially was meant to be, what the initial understanding was, things like that.
One thing I would say is, remember, part of your responsibility as a PM is to give people bad news as well. That's what you're there for. It's not all good news.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there's a way of obviously delivering it, and there's a way of actually communicating it. But be brave.
I think that's a really good point, and I was going to use that word you've just used because you used it earlier in the podcast as well about bravery. At the end of the day, I think my experience is that a lot of people are scared to deliver bad news. To your point. But equally, the problems that brings, because people sleepwalk into the next phase and you don't want to deliver bad news and it just gets deeper and deeper and worse and worse. Whereas, stopping a project is sometimes the right, and we've said it before, it's not the first course of action, of course it's not. But if you're looking at your project and there's issues with scope creep or overspend, forecasted, or time loss, and overshooting in time. And that before it's too late, because obviously, again, we were talking about that a bit earlier. It's your job as a project manager is to highlight these before, while it's still fixable.
Yeah, because it is.
And then you can always go back and revisit costs, revisit business cases, revisit, all of the pre-approval steps again. But I think what I've seen over and again as kind of the biggest problem in this scenario is that people are too worried about the repercussions of going back and saying there's a problem. And you see it, and it's about being brave. And I think that's a great point to kind of finish on.
But did we mention that Concept projects do detailed pre-approval processes and feed studies?
Don't think we did we? No, it wasn't on my cue card.
Yeah, I think that was a nice sales pitch at the end as well, Steve.
That wasn't it.
So that's
shameless.
That's it, guys. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Have you ever had to stop a project early or wish you had? We'd love to hear about your experiences. Comment or reach out to share your story.